there another phone?
Here we go. Welcome again to everyone, and we're going to begin our gathering of Kosher Salt, story time for these times. And as we always do, if I remember, we begin with this little chassidic story about stories. When the great Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov saw misfortune threatening the Jews, it was his custom to go into a certain part of the forest to meditate. There he would light a fire, say a special prayer, and the miracle would be averted. And the miracle would be accomplished and the misfortune averted. Later, when his disciple celebrated Maggid of Mezrich, had occasion for the same reason to intercede with heaven, he would go to the same place in the forest. And he would say, Master of the universe, listen, I do not know how to light the fire, but I'm still able to say the prayer. And again, the miracle would be accomplished and the misfortune averted. Still later, Rabbi Moshe Leib of Sasov, in order to save his people once more, would go into the forest and say, I do not know how to light the fire, and I do not know the prayer, but I know the place, and this must be sufficient. And it was sufficient. And the miracle was accomplished, and the danger, the misfortune averted. Then it fell to Rabbi Yisrael of Rizhin to overcome the misfortune. Sitting in his armchair, his head in his hands, he spoke to God. I am unable to light the fire, and I do not know the prayer. I cannot even find the place in the forest. All I can do is tell the story, and this must be sufficient. And it was sufficient. Today, I've chosen two stories. Each one is short. One is very short, and then the other one is short, but a little longer, but not as long as the story we had last week. And hopefully we'll see that there's some kind of connection between them. These stories are, in my mind, they came up in my thinking because of last week's Torah reading and a little bit because of this week's Torah reading. Last week's Torah reading, we had the discussion of the entry of the high priest into the Holy of Holies on the Day of Atonement. And this was a project, a ritual that was fraught with danger and with anxiety. It's introduced by the phrase Acharei Mot Shnei Bnei Aharon, that this teaching was given to Aaron precisely after two of his sons tried to enter into the temple, into the shrine, and died as a result of doing it improperly. So the issue of going into the holy place is a complicated issue, and an issue that is full of risk, full of concern about how, when, where, who. And in this Torah reading that we have this week, we have further limitations that are imposed on the priests themselves. But then also we have the calendar of festivals where we're all supposed to come and appear before God in the holy temple. And these are the three pilgrimage festivals of Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot. Shavuot is coming up pretty soon. We're now halfway there till from between Passover and Shavuot. We only have a little over 3 weeks left to get there. So the idea of entry into the holy is a theme that preoccupies our Torah readings. So the first story I want to share is by one of the greatest Jewish storytellers of all time, Franz Kafka. And he wrote novels, and he wrote obscure kinds of little parables and little stories and bigger stories. And of course, he's a classic author of modernity, and has been accepted throughout the world as a great literary figure, and someone who has so much to say to the modern condition. So this story is called Before the Law. It's a story that some of you may have heard before. Before the law sits a gatekeeper. To this gatekeeper comes a man from the country who asks to gain entry into the law. But the gatekeeper says that he cannot grant him entry at the moment. The man thinks about it and then asks if he will be allowed to come in later on. It is possible, says the gatekeeper, but not now. At the moment, the gate to the law stands open, as always, and the gatekeeper walks to the side. So the man bends over in order to see through the gate into the inside. When the gatekeeper notices that, he laughs and says, "If it tempts you so much, try it in spite of my prohibition. But take note, I am powerful, and I am only the most lowly gatekeeper. From room to room stand gatekeepers, each more powerful than the other. I can't even endure one glimpse of the third." The man from the country has not expected such difficulties. The law should always be accessible for everyone. That's what he thinks. But as he now looks more closely at the gatekeeper in his fur coat, his large pointed nose, and his long, thin, black Tartar's beard, he decides it would be better to wait until he gets permission to go inside. The gatekeeper gives him a stool and allows him to sit down at the side in front of the gate. There he sits for days and years. He makes many attempts to be let in, and he wears the gatekeeper out with his requests. The gatekeeper often interrogates him briefly, questioning him about his homeland, many other things. But they are indifferent questions, the kind great men put, and at the end, he always tells him once more that he cannot let him inside yet. The man, who has equipped himself with many things for his journey, spends everything, no matter how valuable, to win over the gatekeeper. The latter takes it all. But as he does so, he says, "I am taking this only so that you do not think that you have failed to do anything." During the many years, the man observes the gatekeeper almost continuously. He forgets the other gatekeepers, and this one seems to him the only obstacle for entry into the law. He curses the unlucky circumstance in the first year thoughtlessly and out loud. Later, as he grows old, he still mumbles to himself. He becomes childish, and since in the long years studying the gatekeeper, he has come to know the fleas in his fur collar. He even asks the fleas to help him to persuade the gatekeeper. Finally, his eyesight grows weak, and he does not know whether things are really darker around him or whether his eyes are merely deceiving him. But he recognizes now, in the darkness, an illumination which breaks inextinguishably out from the gateway to the law. Now he no longer has much time to live. Before his death, he gathers in his hand. Before his death, he gathers in his head all his experiences of the entire time up into one question, which he has not yet put to the gatekeeper. Waves to him, since he can no longer lift up his stiffening body. The gatekeeper has to bend way down to him, for the great difference has changed things to the disadvantage of the man. What do you still want to know then? Asks the gatekeeper. You are insatiable. Everyone strives after the law, says the man. So how is it that in these many years, no one except me has requested entry? The gatekeeper sees that the man is already dying, and in order to reach his diminishing sense of hearing, he shouts at him, "Here, no one else can gain entry, since this entrance was assigned only to you. I'm going now to close it." The end. So, I hope you were able to follow it through with my reading it out loud to you. Does anybody want to reflect a little bit on what this is saying, what this sounded like to you? You have to unmute yourself.
I only have questions.
Good.
Which,
Just
like,
like
if the gate was assigned to him, why couldn't he come in?
Yeah,
John, hi, this is Carol. My thinking is when I heard the end that this was his entrance to heaven, and it was his entrance when he was ready.
Well, it doesn't say he's necessarily getting in.
But that
Just
that
says,
would be
I'm going to close it.
his entrance. It's only his entrance if he gets in, and the assumption is you can sort of assume that he is going to get in.
Yeah, I don't like to assume things. I like facts and evidence.
Is that the only assumption we can make? Is there another implication that we can hear from the ending there? Is he really going to get in? Why is the gatekeeper closing the gate right at this moment?
We often never get where we want to get. Life is just striving, and you never know if you're going to achieve what you want to achieve.
So what is Kafka saying about this person striving? You're assuming the opposite of Carol, that in the end he doesn't achieve what he wanted, that he doesn't get in. The gatekeeper is closing the gate because there's no point in keeping it open anymore because the guy is dying.
Well, we don't know, but life is a journey. You never know where it's going to end.
Well, we actually do know when it's going to end. It's going to end when we die.
Yes, but
but
is it going to end where we want it to end? Our life. He wanted to get inside that.
So that's what we're struggling with. That's what we're struggling with here. And Carol would like to think that this is now the happy ending. He's going to get in. So is that really the way people are hearing it? Did anybody hear it in the opposite way, that he's not getting in? Eileen is sort of trying to. What I'm hearing from Eileen is a kind of like a try to be a little still hopeful, even at the end, still trying to be at least not definite, but at least hopeful, right?
I don't think there's any indication that he got in. So,
But we don't know. Because it
well,
just
I think it would say in the action of the story, what we do in drama analysis is we say what's in the text. That's it. Whatever's in the text that's it. That doesn't mean you can't imagine other things, but what's in the text is not clear.
The man is losing all of his strength. He can't hear, he can't see, he can't get up, he can't move. Right? The guy has to bend down to him and tell him, this was your gate. Nobody else comes here because it's only your gate, and I'm closing it now. And that's the end of the story. So in what sense could we possibly imagine that he's getting to go into that gate? Only if we take this as a very, very kind of metaphorical idea, as Carol would say, it's the gate to heaven, and he can only go in once he dies.
But
And
one
he
of the
can't get into heaven before he dies.
But another way from the end of the story, it is saying that he can't move and he's having difficulty seeing. It's very possible by closing the gate, the man. That's how we find out that the man has died. It's another interpretation.
The implication is, it says, "It's only for you. You're dying, so I'm closing the gate because you're gonna."
Not necessarily, John.
And then I think
it could mean he has died.
And I think the next question that leads me to ask is, so if you want to get in, maybe being at your assigned gate is not the way to do it. Obviously, he waited a long time and never got in. So if he wanted to get in, there's something wrong with waiting there.
well, you have to
Didn't achieve the goal.
What?
You have to do more than just wait in life. You have to do something.
So did this person do everything he should have done?
Probably not.
Did he do everything he could have done? What else could he have done?
Good deeds.
We don't know. We just know that by doing what he did, he didn't get in.
So there's a part in the story where he's really curious. He's peeking in. He really wants to see.
Right, it says you could go in without the.
And the gatekeeper says, "Look, if you want to go in, go in. Just know that I'm really scared of those other gatekeepers." But let's imagine again, and let's review what happened with this gatekeeper. This gatekeeper has a Tartar beard and he's got a fierce, expression and so on. Has the gatekeeper done anything to the guy?
No, he gave him a stool.
He gave him a stool, and he actually said.
He asked some questions now and then.
Well, he actually said, "If you want to go in, go in."
Right, but just know there's other people more powerful than me. But
I said you can't go in, but if you want to go in, I'm not stopping you. What kind of gatekeeper is that?
Yeah.
Right. What in the end, what is stopping this guy?
Fear.
Fear, a kind of he's a nice guy. He doesn't want to go against this person's refusal to give him permission. He wants to play by the rules. If anything, he's a very rule conscious, and he wants to go into the law. He wants to gain entry into the law. He thinks that this is a place, as he sees later on, of great illumination. There's a light that's shining out from in there, but he doesn't go in without permission. And in the end, that's the question. What does it mean to have a gate that's only yours, but you need permission to get into it? The gate was made for you. Isn't that enough permission? Isn't that the invitation? I'm making this gate special for you to get into the law. And then you say, well, am I allowed to go in? And this gatekeeper says, no, you're not. But if you want to, go right ahead. So who's putting the barrier up in the end? Who is the real gatekeeper?
The guy waiting, the guy from the country.
Right. So I think that's the way many other people have read the story.
You have to take it. You have to take the law. You have to.
The tragedy here is that he doesn't find out until the very last second of his life that he could have done this. He himself was invited, but he put up his own roadblocks. He put up his own rules, to prohibit himself from going in. The gatekeeper that he confronted was, of course, for him, a very real gatekeeper, but the gatekeeper himself admits, I'm actually not going to do anything to you. I'm just going to tell you no, but I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm not going to punish you if you go in. So that part that's part of the possible irony of this story. I think it's interesting that there is such a desire to make it into a happy story, to make it come out with a happy ending. That's part of Kafka's renown, is that he makes everybody uncomfortable when they read their stories, and we want to be more comfortable. We want to feel that the world makes sense, that things work according to a certain plan, that we can understand what's going on with ourselves, what's happening to us in our lives. Kafka is, the granddaddy of the sense of absurd.
Yeah.
That has been so important in modern thinking.
May I add something?
Sure.
My favorite quote from Kafka, he was asked, what do you have in common with the Jews? And he said, what do I have in common with the Jews? I have hardly anything in common with myself, and should be content to sit quietly in the corner. I love that.
The name of this story is Before the Law. You can find it on on the web.
Look it up.
So there you go. Thank you, John.
He was a strange guy.
He was a strange and tormented man.
Yes.
So, okay, let's keep that story in mind. And now we're going to go to another story, and this is another story from some people see this guy as actually a kind of a proto Franz Kafka, and this is Rav Nachman of Bratslav.
Oh, I like him.
We've heard a story of his before, and I'll give away. My future plans are to have us share a couple of other of his stories. So this is going to be another story, and give a listen. So the name of this story in this translation is The Rabbi's Son. Once there was a rabbi who had no children. Finally, he had an only son. He raised him, married him off. The son used to sit in an attic room and study in the manner of rich men, and he always studied and prayed. The manner of rich men meaning that he had enough support that he didn't have to do anything else. All he did was study, because all the rich people were interested in subsidizing the great prodigies that became Torah scholars. The son had already performed the commandment by which he reached the aspect of the small light. That's in quotes. So the Hamora Kotan, the small light, is going back to an allusion to the story of creation, and there are two big luminaries that are created by God, the sun and the moon. But of course, between the two of them, one of them is bigger than the other. So there's the great light, which is the sun, and then there is the small light, which is the moon. So what Rav Nachman says is the son had already, S-O-N, the rabbi's son, had already attained the spiritual level where he had reached the mystical spiritual significance equivalent to going up to the small light. And yet, he felt that there was some imperfection in himself, but he did not know what it was. So he felt no delight in his study and prayer. He told it to two young men And they advised him to go to a certain tzaddik, certain righteous man. In the terminology, this meant a chassidic leader. The only son went to tell his father that since he did not feel any delight in his worship, his praying, his study, and all the other commandments, and he felt something was missing, but he did not know what, he wanted to go to the tzaddik. And his father had answered him, "Why should you want to go to him? You're a greater scholar than he, and of a better family than he. It's not fitting that you should go to him. Turn away from this road." And thus he prevented him from going. The son returned to his study, and again he felt that imperfection. Again he took counsel with those men, and they advised him, as they had before, to go to the tzaddik. And again he went to his father. His father dissuaded him and prevented him as before. And so it happened several times. The son felt he was missing something, and he longed very much to fulfill this imperfection, but did not know what it was. So he came once more to his father and implored him, till his father was forced to go with him, because he did not want to let him go by himself, since he was an only son. And his father told him, "I shall go with you and show you there is nothing real in him." They harnessed the carriage and set out. The father said to him, "This is how I shall test. If the journey proceeds without mishap, it's from heaven. And if not, it is not from heaven, and we shall return." They set out. They came to a small bridge, and one horse fell down, and the carriage turned over, and they almost drowned. Father said, "You see, this journey does not proceed without mishap, and it is not from heaven." And they returned home. The son went back to his studies, and again he saw his imperfection and did not know why. He came again and implored his father, as he had done before, and the father was forced to go with him again. When they set out, his father established the former test: if it proceeds without mishap, etc. And it happened that while they were traveling, the two axles broke. And his father told him, "You see that it does not proceed as if we should go. Since is it natural for two axles to break? They have traveled so many times with this carriage, and nothing like that has happened." And so they returned home. The son returned to his way of life, that is, to his studies and so on, and again felt that imperfection. And the men advised him to travel, and the son told his father that they should not establish such a test, since it is natural for a horse to fall sometimes, or for axles to break, unless there is something very bizarre. They set out and came to an inn to spend the night. They found a merchant there and started talking to him like merchants do, but they did not reveal to him where they were going, because the rabbi was ashamed to say that he was going to the tzaddik. They talked about the affairs of the world until, in the course of the conversation, they reached the subject of tzaddikim, the general class of these righteous men, these tzaddik people. Tzaddikim is plural. And where tzaddikim were to be found. The merchant told them there was a tzaddik there, and there, and there. So they started talking about the tzaddik that they were traveling to. Then the other answered in amazement, "What? But he is frivolous. I'm coming from him now, and I was there when he committed a sin. Father answered and said to his son, do you see, my son, what this merchant has reported while speaking plainly with no intention to malign? And he is coming from there. So they returned home. And the son died. And he came to his father, the rabbi, in a dream. When he saw his son standing in great anger, he asked him, why are you so angry? He answered him that he should go to the tzaddik whom they had intended to go to, and he will tell you why I am angry. The father woke up, said it was just a coincidence. Afterwards, he dreamt again as before, and he said this too was an idle dream. And then it happened a third time. And then he'd understood that there was something in it. And he traveled there. On his way, he met the merchant whom he had met before when they had traveled together, he and his son. And recognizing him, he said to him, aren't you the one whom I saw in that inn? He answered him, of course you saw me. The merchant opened his mouth and told him, I can swallow you if I want to. He said to him, what are you talking about? And he replied, do you remember when you traveled with your son? First, the horse fell off the bridge, and you returned. And then the axles broke. Then you met me, and I told you that the tzaddik was frivolous. And now that I have done away with your son, you are allowed to go on. For your son was in the aspect of the small light. And that tzaddik is in the aspect of the great light. And if they had united, the Messiah would have come. But now that I have done away with him, you are allowed to travel on. In the middle of his words, he disappeared. And the rabbi had no one to talk to. The rabbi traveled to the tzaddik, and he cried, what a pity, what a pity on those who are lost and will never be found. May the Lord, blessed be he, return our exiles shortly. Amen. Then the final paragraph in parentheses, words that Rav Nachman added to the group that was listening to the story. That merchant was Samael himself. Samael is the name for Satan, the angel of death, the evil inclination. That merchant was Samael himself, who disguised himself as a merchant and led them astray. Afterwards, when he met the rabbi again, he teased him for having heeded his advice, because this is Samael's manner, as is known. May the Holy Blessed One save us. That's the end of the story. So
That's a great story.
I'm glad you feel that way. Good. It is a great story. Why do you think it's great?
Because it shows the emphasis on money and prestige and even knowledge that the family of the son had is still not enough to keep you from being led astray.
Who was led astray here?
The father, who thought they were too grand for a wonder rabbi.
I think both.
Why both? John?
Well, the son was led astray by his father, and the father was led astray by being fooled. And what's interesting is that the father, kept saying, "Oh, it's a coincidence. It's." I mean, at the beginning, he said, whenever these bad things happen, "Oh, it's a sign. It's a sign. It's a sign." But then when the son comes to him in a dream, that's just a coincidence. That's a spot of mustard, as Scrooge said. It's like nothing. And so it's very fungible.
Right. When something is significant and meaningful and is telling you something, and when it isn't, very much depends on what we want it to be telling us.
What we want to hear.
What we want to hear and what we want to believe, and how we see things already. Carol.
The father was looking for a reason not to go, and when each incident happened, he used it as his excuse to turn back. But it's interesting, if they had persevered, the Messiah would have come. So it's an interesting concept.
So let's remember that this rabbi is a very pious, upstanding Jew. He's considered, in the community and considered by any objective standard to be an exemplary person. He's blessed with a son. He raises his son beautifully. His son is an extraordinary human being and an extraordinary Jew in his own right. Right. So these are special people. It's not just anybody that gets to become a candidate to bring the Messiah. Right. So these are unique and important people, and we have this report about the son, especially, that he had reached this amazing spiritual level, right? That is, a one person in a generation kind of thing. So, what do we make of the fact that he felt something was missing in his life? I mean, he had already, as the story starts,
he was seeking the greater light.
He already achieved this. He had done mitzvot in such a way that he had achieved this extraordinary status, this extraordinary standing, and yet he's miserable. What's that all about?
He sensed there was more. He sensed that there was a greater light out there, like he's drawn to it in some way.
So he sensed that there was something, that there was more. Is it just a question of wanting more? Is it just an appetite kind of thing? Is it just an ambition kind of thing? He didn't understand what was bothering him. He didn't quite understand what it was that was gnawing at his soul. But by the end of the story, we actually find out. What do we find out? That what was missing for him?
What was missing from him? Confidence?
Well, was it something that, to load the question a little bit more, was it something that he himself could attain? Was it more, spiritual purity? Was it more knowledge? Was it a more profound way of studying? What was he missing?
He was missing the connection with the tzaddik. He was missing the synergy between himself and the tzaddik.
Right. What was missing, he would never be able to fulfill on his own. That was the problem. The problem was, no matter how isolated and protected he was from all of the, the terrible stuff that's out there in the world. And no matter how great he had become in that protected ivory tower, that pure space, he's not besmirched, he's not defiled, he's not made impure by anything. But in the end, what he can't overcome is precisely that isolation. What he can't get over is that he needs that partner. He needs that spiritual partner, and that spiritual partner is the tzaddik. The tzaddik is
Also, Rabbi,
sure, Rita, yeah, go.
the tzaddik needed him in order to complete this.
That's right. That's right. The tzaddik has been waiting for him. The tzaddik says, if you could have brought your son to me,
Yeah, we together.
that would have been amazing. That would have been the missing ingredient to create the Messiah. And yes, the tzaddik himself is also incapable of doing that on his own. But but how come the son then dies and the tzaddik doesn't? Just because the tzaddik is the bigger light? Why is there a difference here in their ending of the story? Which
It's like
that's the way the story goes. But I think that we can put some more into it. Yeah.
The story, in some ways, it's like the opposite of Lashon Hara. It's like it's only good speech going, but it still deludes them, and it seems like it kills the son. I mean, I think it doesn't say why he died, but it could be that he just never was fulfilled. But the father is not saying, evil things. He's saying good things. You're just as smart as the tzaddik. You don't need him.
No, there was a lot of pride in there.
And he's looking for, God's signals all along the way. These are sort of the things you'd think you're supposed to do.
The merchant puts down the tzaddik.
Right.
And they listen, and they find confirmation, and the father finds all confirmation in all of his negative feelings to begin with. When he hears, oh yeah, the tzaddik is not such a big deal after all. He's really a fraud. He's really frivolous. He's not serious. And I even saw that he sinned a little bit. So there is a little bit of lashon hara here for sure. But you're right. From the rabbi's perspective, he's being completely righteous. He's maintaining standards. He's maintaining a very a high standard for his son. He believes in his son. So there's he can tell himself that he's on the right path, but he doesn't put it past believing that this tzaddik is up to no good. Part of the historical background, one second, part of the historical background of this story is that the rabbi represents all the anti-chassidic establishment.
Yeah.
And the tzaddik represents the
Hasidim. Yeah.
So this was still early on. This was the early 1800s. This is the first decades of the Hasidic movement, and there was tremendous opposition to the Hasidim, and the Hasidim were accused of being not learned.
Right. This is the Miknagdim, right?
Right. Not so strict in the way that they kept the Torah. They didn't pray respecting the proper time for praying. They were a little too casual. This is very ironic because for us today, the Hasidim are the ultra-Orthodox, but at that time they were considered actually loose cannons and people that were not to be trusted or respected. So that's part of what's.
We're the new Hasids.
Yeah, right.
No, we are. We're like we're more into.
Who's we? What do you mean by we?
The liberal movements of Judaism are more into maybe not ecstatic expression, but non-traditional and trying to find what's the word? Accessible, less scholarly access. I guess that's what I see. I see the connection. The Hasidim have become the Orthodox, and it just keeps moving the spectrum.
What I was going to say is when you think about the ending of the current story and the ending of the previous story, the man sitting on the stool didn't go through the gate. The son never got to the tzaddik. So both both were not able to fulfill what they wanted to do. If you're tying the two stories together.
Right, and absolutely. And if we Kafka is a little more
cynical,
cagey about how he tells us what's happening. In the end, Rav Nachman is very explicit about why the son of the rabbi and the rabbi himself, why did they not succeed? Rav Nachman tells us explicitly why they didn't succeed.
Right, because it was Satan.
Because it was the evil inclination. Right. It was the bad one who is inside each and every one of us. And we can listen to that bad voice or not. And that's where
so sometimes the good voice is not to obey your father. The son could have gone on his own.
Right.
That's what I was thinking.
And this is also reflective of a tremendous part of the sociological reality of the time, where the chassidic movement was, in many ways, now, as I say, now we see it as something that has been exemplary as the most traditional, ultra orthodox group. But at the time, they were family breakers.
Yeah.
To use a phrase from last week's story, they broke up families. The idea that you had to go to the tzaddik instead of staying home with your family, people did that in defiance of their parents, defiance of the father, who of course was the official head of the family. And there was actually a lot of social upheaval in the Jewish community about the breakdown of standard structures of authority and the standard structures of how a community was organized. Who's supposed to be the head of the community, the rabbi or the tzaddik? So the story has all of this. It's very focused on this one little family, but it's also a kind of a parable for the entire Jewish community. And yes, if you want to go for what's right and what's true, and what's liberating and what's redemptive,
you have to reject.
You can't just go with the same old. You can't go with the old authorities that are blind to what's going on. Who tells the son to go to the tzaddik?
The other people in the town?
The other young people in the town.
The rebels.
The rebels, the young generation. Right? The older generation is satisfied with where they are. They recognize the rabbi of the town, and so on. I as I'm listening to myself, I'm beginning to get a little nervous that maybe I shouldn't be telling you this story. But don't listen to the rabbi. But that's part of what's playing out here. Is there's this yearning. The young generation has not acclimated itself, has not made peace with the situation. The father doesn't feel a lack. The father doesn't feel that there's anything missing. Right? But the son has gone on this trajectory which has brought him so close to some really ultimate revolution, to use a secular term, which of course all comes from Jewish messianic teaching. But he gets so close, and then he gives in to listening to his father. Right? So that piety, thank you very much, Meryl. that piety is tragic. Right? That piety is what actually in the end
is the obstacle.
Stops him from going through. And I think that's another similarity to the Kafka story. The guy is a good man. The guy wants to follow the rules.
But he listens
the guy, and by following what he thinks are the rules, he ends up betraying his own destiny. He ends up not going through the path that's his path to go through. And he can't do it because of the excuses and the limitations that he places upon himself, and totally arguably legitimate. Right? That's the thing. That merchant being Samael, that's, who could know? Nobody could know. And that's part of the ending of the story also.
Yeah, Rabbi, isn't it there are traditions throughout stories of the Messiah would have come if only this or if only that
Sure.
had happened?
That's right. Right.
So this is part of that tradition.
Yes, absolutely. The missed opportunity for the Messiah. The long tradition. As long as the Messiah is not here, that tradition is going to keep on continuing.
Okay.
And it's part of the yearning. It's part of the yearning that people feel so desperately. At the end of the story, Rav Nachman tells us, you know who that merchant was? It was Samael. It was the devil. It was Satan. And he says, and that's why he says that. Can I find it again? Yeah. He says, afterwards, when he met the rabbi again, he teased him for having heeded his advice. So this is Samael's manner. This is the extra sadism of the devil, is to then rub your nose in the fact you could have done it. You didn't have to listen to me. You didn't have to. Well, of course, Samael wants you to listen to him completely. He's completely invested. Where is Samael going to be? For Samael, this is a life and death issue. If Samael fails with this rabbi and his son, Messiah comes.
And that's
the end of Samael. So Samael has everything to gain and everything to lose, depending on what happens here. So he really wants them to listen. But once he does listen, then the cruelty of Samael comes out, where he goes, who asked you to listen to me? What a fool you were. Right? That extra digging in of making the person feel so miserable. Why does Samael do that? Simply because they're cruel? For one more reason. And that is because if you feel miserable, if you beat yourself up, then Samael wins again. That's part of his agenda. Part of his agenda is to get us to beat ourselves up.
Or to succumb to wishful thinking.
Well, wishful thinking or depression. Wishful thinking or self-judgment to the point of saying, oh, look at what I did. I completely blew it. I completely, didn't do what I should have done. As the rabbi says in the end, Chaval al da'avdin v'lo mishtachin. How sad it is that we have lost something that we will never be able to find again. Right? The answer is that you'll always be able to find it again, but you feel that you'll never be able to find it again. Right? If that was the only time that Messiah could ever have come, then we should stop praying for the Messiah. We should give up the whole thing. Okay, the story is over, and there's nothing more to talk about. But no, there'll always be another chance for the Messiah.
And that's why the tzaddik doesn't die.
What?
That's why the tzaddik still there, because he still could be waiting for the next great small moon to show up.
Excellent. And there's one other big difference between the tzaddik and the rabbi's son. The tzaddik has a community. And the rabbi's son, remember, he's off by himself. He's completely isolated. He's completely hidden away to save him from any bad influences, from any distractions, from any Samael, hijinks. Right? He's completely been protected from that, danger, but at the expense of having a community that he can be with, either to draw strength from or to serve. Mm-hmm. And the tzaddik, even though he's waiting for this particular guy for the final redemptive moment, but meanwhile, the tzaddik is with his followers and with his community. Right? He's in, the collective. He's exposed to the outside world. He's exposed to the real world, and maybe in that way, he is, in a certain sense, inoculated from the Samael. right? It's like what we call, when we tell parents, let your kids get a little dirty, let your kids get a little, exposed to some germs, not the germs that we have out, God forbid, at this moment, but all the other stuff. Let them eat a little bit of dirt sometimes. Why not? It'll build up their strength and their immunity and their capability of coping with the challenges that the environment puts out for them. They will be healthier, stronger creatures. So there's that big difference as well.
It's like in teaching. It's the same way when students want to do something like in a show or something. You think it's not going to work, and you want to caution them from doing this. It's not going to work, and sometimes it's better to let them make the mess or whatever. And then also what happens is once in a while they show you it does work.
Yeah.
They're not subject to your self-editing from age and experience and all those good things that also cause us to not take chances. So it's always been that tug, that push and pull.
You're cutting in and out. Say that again.
Somebody's got some other stuff going on. If you could mute yourself, that would be
okay.
Those first couple of attempts are right along those lines. First couple of attempts where the father gives in, and that's also, it's so touching. The father does love his son tremendously, right? He wants only good for his son, and he finally breaks down and agrees to go with the son. He's just going to be the chaperone, right? But then as soon as something goes wrong on the road, that's it. We're not doing anything anymore. We're not going, right? Where the idea of making the mistake or failing or stumbling as part of the journey rather than as stopping the journey is not something that he doesn't want it to happen. He doesn't want that to be the journey. So he's not willing to let that simply be, a glitch in the road. It becomes the gate. It becomes the gate that they won't walk through. Right? That's each one of these has that gate that they won't walk through. And the tzaddik, from the father's perspective, is someone that he wants to feel contempt for, right? As soon as he hears that bad report, oh yeah, the tzaddik is not serious, he's frivolous, and he's
ready to believe.
Oh yeah, that's fine. But and he says to his son, really, the tzaddik is nothing compared to you. So he's putting him down. But really, in the end, he's also scared stiff of the guy. He's very afraid of that tzaddik. The tzaddik is the next gatekeeper inside, who's even more scary than the whole concept itself. Yeah, and it's a challenge to his relation to his son as well. Yes, very rich, little story, a little fairy tale kind of story, but very, very rich.
Great.
Thank you for today, and
thank you, Rabbi.
Again.
Terrific. Thank you.
Thank you.